Our church is 154 years old, so the congregation actually started meeting in Army barracks and was one of the first denominations kind of on the scene as Sioux Falls was forming as a community.
Thank you for joining us. We know that your time is valuable and we appreciate you spending it with us.
This show is talking about beyond the blueprint and what happens kind of behind the scenes of the construction world, and also what happens in our lives from a family business and ranching and all the things that keep us building and moving forward.
And if there's something that you heard that resonates with you, whether it was a joke, an idea, please like this, share it with someone you know, and feel free to leave comments. We look forward to seeing what you have to say.
Let's dig in.
Welcome back to the Two Bs in a Podcast. I'm Brad Jans with Jans Corporation. Today I'm joined with my brother Brian and Pastor Sara from First United Methodist Church in Sioux Falls. We're going to talk a little bit about a recent project we did, learn more about Pastor Sara, and get into the details of the church.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
So welcome, Pastor Sara. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to meet with us and talk about all the wonderful things that are happening, not only inside this church, but in the community of Sioux Falls as well. And so before we get into some of the projects and the things that we've been involved in with the church, what's one amazing thing about First United Methodist Church that you would want everybody to know what sets us apart?
So one of the things that I love about First United Methodist is our congregation and how we put our faith in action, and the passion for feeding people who are struggling with food insecurity, building houses, mentoring youth. I've never been a part of a church that is so passionate about living out their faith, and I think that makes us unique in that way.
You know, I think a lot of people may have the conception that, or the thought that churches are a Sunday morning event, and the doors are closed most of the rest of the week, but that is certainly not the case at our church. As you mentioned, a lot of missional priorities, and we'll get more into that, but it truly is a week-long project for you, or full-time job, so to speak, not just in giving a sermon or a worshiping service, but all the things that this church does.
That's really true. The church is busy all week long, and we're fortunate to have an after-school program, a summer program, and we actually house the Toy Lending Library for which is a wonderful nonprofit organization. And so, I mean, it's kind of a hopping place pretty much all week long.
I know our employees just went through the United Way process for giving their donations for the year, and the Toy Lending Library is part of what the United Way does. So knowing that goes right here into our church is amazing.
Sara, what's one thing that you would say people probably don't know about being a pastor in the current times?
So I think one thing that people might be surprised about, that's really changed since COVID, is just the knowledge of technology that you have to have, but also being really comfortable with technology as well. I remember when COVID was first started, and all of a sudden you're watching yourself and people are watching you, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm kind of a televangelist at this point in time, and at least for a couple months. And so for me, that really shifted the way in which I lead worship, and because it's important to recognize, at least for us, we live stream every worship service, and so we have as many people who are worshiping with us online as we do who are in the room with us in person. And we have folks from all over the country actually who worship with us every single Sunday morning. And so I think that people are often surprised to hear that this church in Sioux Falls, South Dakota is connecting with about 15 other states every Sunday morning. And because of that, we've really had to shift a lot of the ways in which we lead worship, and myself included. I completely shifted my preaching style during COVID because it was necessary to be able to connect with both folks who are worshiping in the room, but also folks who are worshiping online, and kind of hiding behind the pulpit and looking down at your notes a ton. That wasn't very relational. And so, but I think that people are surprised at that because we kind of have those old models in our mind of, that it's all about what happens on Sunday morning, and it's a lot more than that in a good way.
Yeah.
I do have a burning question for you. So as Brad and I ventured on this podcast, we realized like, hey, this is getting recorded and will be out there forever. With that change in technology and that you are live streaming, but you're also recording, and so people can go back. Your sermons have to be fresh and new every time. You can't go back to the old playbook and say, that was a really good one. I'm going to just recycle that one.
That's very true. That's right, because it's archived somewhere. So,
Right.
well, and I think that's been the fun part, preaching it's an art, and it's such a privilege to be able to share the good news of God and to encourage people in their faith, and so being online, it does kind of heighten what you're doing, because you do know that, and sometimes people go back and they'll rewatch it, and I'll hear from folks that have said, I was thinking about that sermon that you preached, I don't know when, and I have a question about that, and I'm thinking, God, I don't even remember that sermon, but it's neat the way technology can continue to really lift people up in their faith and help people continue to grow.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's great too because a lot of people can't always make it on Sunday, and so they have the opportunity to watch it when it's available to them. And if they have one that is a favorite, they can go back and watch it again too.
I guess.
That's great. Just like our podcast. Continue to watch it anytime you want. One of the things that I really love about this church is how it has something for everybody, every age. And our congregation is filled with people from different generations. My family alone, we have 3 generations that attend this church. My parents come to this church. Obviously, my wife and I do, and our kids do. What age group gives you the most trouble?
I knew you were going to ask this question. I would say probably adults are the most challenging.
Like my age adults or the senior adults?
Well, it kind of depends on the day. Yeah, I mean, adults are so interesting because you can, there's so many different seasons of life and so many different things that people can be going through, of life transitions, struggles with, kids, with babies, with teenagers, and then kind of aging as well, and some of the challenges that come along with that. And so I would say I love that part, but it's definitely probably the most challenging.
Sure.
So I know this church has an amazing history in Sioux Falls. Can you share a little bit from the iconic tree that's out by Minnesota to the congregation, and just a little bit more about the history of First United Methodist?
Absolutely. So our church is 154 years old. So the congregation actually started meeting in Army barracks and was one of the first denominations kind of on the scene as Sioux Falls was forming as a community. And so the church building that we're in right now is actually the 3rd building, but it's still over 100 years old as well. And so it's really had this history of kind of the parallel growth with Sioux Falls has been the growth of First United Methodist as well. A couple years ago, we celebrated our 150th, and so that was really fun to reflect on the past 150 years and kind of dream about what the next 150 years could be. I think one of my favorite stories of our church is, it actually has to do with the stained glass window right over there, that they had just built this church, and I could imagine, they built it in 1914, and so what a labor of love when some of the advances with technology were not available, and to build this beautiful church. And Ms. Lizzie Thomas was sitting in the balcony and just had this dream of continuing to grow and to push and to evolve as a church. And she really wanted to have some beautiful stained glass in the sanctuary because there wasn't any at that time. And so she was in her 80s at this time, and so she decided that she would encourage people to bring a foot of pennies, and that if they could get enough feet of pennies that they could pay for this stained glass window. So they ended up raising, I think, 1,200 pennies. Again, it's 1914, 1915, something like that. And they were able to raise enough funds to have that stained glass window installed, and I find that really inspiring, and I think it's really very much a part of the ethos of First United Methodist is that we're not going to stand still. that God is moving, and we want to be a part of that movement of the Holy Spirit, and not just to say, hey, we built this, now we're good. That God is still moving through all of that. And so I find that really inspiring, that I think that's very much a part of the DNA of this church.
Yeah.
I never knew that story, but one of my favorite pictures from my wife and I's wedding is in front of that.
Really?
It is.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's the Garden of Gethsemane. Yeah.
I know that too. I'll have to write that down. Like, sure, that was Stacy.
So what would be a reason that you'd say it's important to preserve the building instead of starting new?
Well, there's a lot of history here, and I know that for some congregations, they've discerned that they're going to move out kind of into the suburbs or other places. But several years ago, really before I even arrived here, the congregation made a decision that they felt really called to be in the heart of Sioux Falls. And so if we were going to stay here, we wanted to continue to have a church that is welcoming and has that beautiful historic feel, but also is keeping up with the times. And so I think that in the remodel was a really important balance. I mean, for me, the number one priority was maintaining the historic integrity while we make some changes to seamlessly integrate some of the modern conveniences that we need and we want. And I think there's something really beautiful about remembering our past, because our past is always a part of us, whether we're as people or as organizations or as churches. And so being able to preserve the best parts and then hold on to that as we move into the future is, I think, incredibly important.
Yeah.
I think one of the coolest parts that I thought about the whole project, so because obviously built over 100 years ago, technology was different, or lack thereof, and so the big dome was built for the transmission of sound. That's what it was designed to do. Now with microphones and stereo equipment, you have to fight over that, and we obviously aren't going to change the concept of the dome. But during that remodel project, we found a skylight, or there were some skylights that had been covered up in time, and we were able to rejuvenate those, light them up, and actually present them back to provide more light in the back of the sanctuary, which was always dark. So even reusing stuff that had been not used for a long time was a great part of the project.
I would agree. That's one of my favorite parts of the remodel, was the uncovering of the skylight, and people, I hear from people that have been here their whole lives and they had no idea that even existed. And so to be able to bring that back to life, I think was really, really significant.
Well, maybe as a way to get viewers to recognize maybe where our church is located, one of the things that they're probably aware of is the Christmas tree out front.
Yeah.
Would you share a little bit about that history and that story?
Yeah, so we call that Dorothy's Tree of Hope. And over 30 years ago, Dorothy and Dale Weir were just taking a drive during kind of the Christmas season. And Dale, being a great husband, asked Dorothy, well, what do you want, honey? What do you want for Christmas? And they just happened to be driving down Minnesota Avenue. And at that time, we had this beautiful, huge evergreen. And she said, that tree, I want you to have that tree decorated so that others are encouraged and kind of experience the brightness and the magic of the Christmas season. You know, I wonder, Dale and Dorothy have long passed, and I never had a chance to meet them, but I kind of wonder if she thought that, oh, he would actually do it, you know? Sure. But he did, and so he had the tree decorated. It was beautiful, and then it kind of started this annual tradition where we light up the tree. And so a couple years ago, trees, just like people, have lifespans, and from a couple of arborists, we really learned that tree wasn't native to South Dakota. It had lived far longer than anyone would have ever expected it would, but it was dying. And so we wanted to continue that tradition, and so we were able to, because of the generosity of Dale and Dorothy, and to be able to purchase an artificial tree that would continue that tradition. And so I think you all built the platform for us, and so it's in a platform in the middle of the parking lot, and it's been a fun tradition to continue to light that up, because it really does, I think, bring hope to the community as well as the church. I love I'm here at all kinds of times during the day, and so I love walking out at the end of the day and it's dark and you see people just sitting in their car just looking at the tree. Or sometimes I'll come into the church and I'll see people taking a family picture in front of the tree. Yeah. And I don't know them, and so my imagining is they're probably members of the community, but it means something to them, and I think that's another way that we can share that hope as a congregation.
Sure. So if you're driving down Minnesota Avenue between 12th and 13th Street and you don't notice the big lit up tree, put your cell phone away because you're probably distracted.
It could be.
So historical remodels are different from a lot of different remodel projects. What are a couple things about this one specifically, when we started working together, that you were hoping for? What mattered the most in its evolution?
Definitely what mattered the most for me was maintaining that historic nature of the sanctuary, that and really enhancing it and bringing back some of those elements to life. I definitely learned a lot. I would chalk that up to things you didn't learn in seminary, as working with a huge capital campaign and construction remodel. My favorite part by far was when we had, 40 feet of scaffolding in here, and you all let me go up to the top. And so kind of hard hat and vest in hand, and to be able to see down into the sanctuary was so cool. And but it just, I think there were so many things that went so well. I wouldn't have changed any of it.
That's great to hear. It was a fun project specifically for us too. A lot of challenges for sure when you're trying to match old and new, and you're pulling up woodwork from 100 years ago that you're trying to match. And fortunately, we had the people and the ability to match that stuff. But just a great organization to work with too. And as we uncovered new things, just the ideas that rolled on how do we address that challenge and make it a part of what we're doing was it's one of the best projects we've done.
Oh,
it's been great.
I'm so glad to hear that. I think one of the other aspects that was really important to our team was safety and then accessibility. And so now we have a fully accessible platform, and it's much safer for those who worship in the balconies. And so there were just lots of aspects of it that I think we'd been hoping for and dreaming of and thinking of, well, how could we do this? How could we do that? Sure. And just working together, it came together beautifully.
I remember at this time last year, we were under construction. And
Yes,
so
we were.
During the busy Christmas season that churches certainly are in, and we had set up kind of a walkway for people coming for service could walk into the sanctuary safely and be able to get a full visual of the work that's going on. And I thought that was just an incredible gesture from the church to allow people to see the progress, but also to encourage them that, hey, we're getting there, it's close, and this is what it's going to look like when it's done. And so it was really cool to include them in that process as well, too.
Yeah, that was really important to me, and I think to the church in general is, the Sunday before we moved out of the sanctuary, we invited everybody to come and lay hands on kind of walls and pews and things to pray for how God would kind of move through the sanctuary after it was remodeled. And, we've actually hidden some letters and prayers in the sanctuary. I know where they are. And so hopefully, it seems like they've done, our church has done a remodel about every 30 to 40 years. So I didn't hide it too hard. But in 30 years, when they do the next remodel, hopefully they'll find those prayers and letters that our current congregation wrote to the future congregation. And so we tried to have fun with it. I mean, we were out of the sanctuary for 9 months, and that's always kind of a unique experience. But we tried to make it meaningful and spiritually enlivening, but also to kind of be lighthearted and fun with it, and had T-shirts and all kinds of things. So it went well.
Yeah.
Were there any specific details to the remodel that had more of an emotional tie to you, or that turned out beyond what you were expecting?
Absolutely. So the green that is the accent color was actually kind of a historic color from 1914. And for me, green, that's the color of life. It's the color of growth. And I'm just in awe when I walk into the sanctuary. It's the first thing I notice every single time.
Color of your jacket.
It is the color of my jacket. Personally, it's my favorite color too. But we didn't choose it because it was my favorite, I promise. But I think it just enlivens the space, and it just kind of, I don't know, I have this just sense of awe every time I walk in. And so I'm grateful to the designers, because I am not a designer, and my husband would tell you that I don't pick colors at our house because I'm kind of bad at it, and he has a much more expansive vision for those kinds of things than I do. So I was really grateful for the expertise that could kind of help us maybe dream beyond what we could see ourselves, and so I think that's probably one of my favorite pieces. And then I think one of the other pieces is you'll notice that the United Methodist symbol is the cross and flame, and that it's kind of subtly sprinkled throughout the sanctuary. It's on the pulpit, it's on some of the light fixtures, and that's totally new. And it wasn't something that was on our radar when we started the project, but it was definitely kind of claiming our roots was important.
Yeah, even some of the frames and the doors and the glass are crosses. So you just wouldn't notice unless you kind of get a point out,
Yeah.
or if you're looking for that.
Absolutely. There's a lot of subtle kind of symbolic meaning.
Well, I think a nod to TSP, the firm that worked on that design. I mean, they did an outstanding job.
Yeah, they did. They were fantastic.
So we'll show some previous pictures of what the sanctuary looked like to what it looks like today. And, one of the more prominent features was a big brass railing that went around the balcony, and even the stairs changed shape. It's not so up front as the stairs used to be to get to the choir loft. Can you talk a little bit about that challenge with how to incorporate a new balcony railing system that's not going to block the view of what's going on in the church?
Yeah, that was a big challenge. We knew that for safety reasons, that the railing needed to be different than it was before, because it was really, really low before. And but also we didn't want it to be where no one would want to sit in the balcony because you couldn't see. And so we're grateful to have good people that could kind of give us some different solutions for that. One of the challenges too is it's an old building, and so we uncovered asbestos multiple times, and we knew it was here. We didn't quite know it was that much, and so just kind of having to be patient and knowing that there are going to be surprises along the way.
Well, I think there were some, structural issues too. This was built obviously with the intent of maybe structural engineers were a little different back then and calculated things a little bit differently. But we were adding some weight, taking the brass hollow rail up and putting tube steel and putting cable in. Added some additional weight to those balcony that are truly cantilevered out overhangs, and so we had to beef up some of that support to make sure there's not a lot of movement and people aren't scared of. When we get to rocking in here, we don't want to start shaking the whole building.
We do clap. We do clap and
little bit.
sway. Yes.
Gets wild.
Gets a little crazy during worship.
Clapping and swaying.
Well, I was going to ask, just tell us a little bit about your history and how you got involved in ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started sensing a call to ministry when I was a teenager, and didn't really know what to do with that. I grew up in a tradition that where there were women pastors, but it wasn't something that I'd experienced personally, and so I'd never actually met a woman pastor until I went to college. And so sometimes when you don't see anyone that looks like you doing something you feel called to do, you kind of question, well, is that possible? How does that work? And so when I met my husband, he invited me to come to church with him. And lo and behold, his pastor was a woman. And what's really cool about it is that she is now a retired pastor, and she's a part of our congregation. And so now I get to be her pastor, which is so cool. And so, I sensed this call, and that just kind of wouldn't let me go. And I did. My first career was actually as a social worker, which was amazing preparation for becoming a pastor. But there got to be a point where I just knew that that it was time to take that leap. And so I was really drawn to pastoral ministry just out of kind of a deep love for God and a deep love for people and wanting to bring those two things together. And so I feel like every place that I've ever served as pastor, I've been able to grow in my own faith and hopefully help those around me grow in theirs and to really live out our faith together as a community.
So being the pastor of a church, especially a church of this size, it's probably the biggest Methodist church in the district. Being a pastor is a lot like being a business owner. There's a lot of different angles and elements you have to contribute, not just giving a sermon on Sunday morning.
You mean I don't just work on Sundays?
I don't know if you have a day off, actually. I don't know what day you don't work. What has surprised you the most about choosing this path in life that you maybe seminary didn't prepare you for, or that you weren't aware of even as you went through mentors that maybe you weren't aware was going to be that big of an impact in your life?
Sure. I would say probably the business aspect of leading a church, that we want to be good stewards of the resources that we have. We want to lead the organization well. And so I spend quite a lot of time in business meetings. And so that was probably a bit of a surprise when as a 15-year-old, I kind of envisioned being a pastor looking a little different, but I've come to discover that I really like that part of it too.
You even had to learn construction.
I
How to run a construction project.
I did. Especially at the beginning, sometimes the questions that you all would ask me, I'm like, I might need to Google that later because I'm not quite sure what I just agreed to.
It's what we do. We just get you the sign real quick, and then we'll take care of it. We got it.
Or a lot of, can I get back to you on that one when I figure out what that really means?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what does a mission-driven church look like in today's world?
I think a mission-driven church, what that looks like is a church that is really focused on the impact that we can make for Christ, not only inside of the walls of the church, but outside of the walls of the church. And I do think that sometimes congregations can become pretty insulated and they begin to kind of exist for themselves. And but mission-driven churches, they are outward focused. And so they take good care of those who are within the church family, but that ministry doesn't stop there, that's the starting point, not the ending point. And so I think a mission-driven church has great clarity around how are we making a difference for people's actual lives. Years ago, I read a story about, and I think it was a church in Denver, and they had done kind of a survey of people in their community, and they had asked people in their neighborhood, how could the church be helpful to you? How could the church make your life better? And they interviewed all kinds of people, and they ended up interviewing a man that said, there's nothing that the church could do that could make my life better. And the church took that to heart, and they said, we want to be a church where no matter who you are, we could help make your life better because of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so rather than taking that comment and saying, oh, that's just kind of maybe someone who's having a bad day or dismissing it any kind, they really took it to heart and tried to be that church. And that story has kind of inspired me and haunted me a little bit over the years, because I probably read it, 10 years ago, and of always wanting to serve a church that if we had to close our doors tomorrow, which we are totally not doing, but if we had to close our doors tomorrow, that the community would miss us because we were making a real difference for Jesus in our own community.
I think a lot of people, when they hear the word mission, they think of a mission trip, where you send people either to a third world country or to a different challenging part of our country. And certainly our church does that. I know our youth is heavily involved in mission trips. My kids alone have gone to third world countries and to other parts of the country the last couple summers traveling, which is great and a great work to do. But, in getting involved in this church, it's realized that missions are a lot more than that. And it's just things you do in your own community that you may think is just a helping hand, but it's truly a missional. Could you maybe just touch on a few of the things that we do as a church missionally around us? I know food insecurity is one that you mentioned. We do a lot with that. Mm-hmm. Could you just touch on some of those things that we are involved in as a congregation that we give back to the community and those who are around us.
Of course. So I think one of our big ministries is we partner with Feeding South Dakota, which is such a great organization, and we have monthly food distributions right in our parking lot. And we're the largest one in the city. I mean, we have such a great location, and so on average, we provide about 50 to 60 pounds of food on a monthly basis to nearly 400 families. And that's every single month, the first Wednesday of the month. And Brian serves on that team. My husband serves on that team. Stacy serves on that team. Our youth often help with that. And I think that that's such an incredible way that we can partner with other organizations that are doing good work, but that also very much aligns with our mission and our vision. We also are heavily involved in the banquet, both the downtown as well as the west side. And at one time, the banquet told us that we were actually their second most regular missional group that serves. And so we serve at least twice a month and often serve kind of periodically throughout the year as well. And so, but then we also have our free after school and summer kids program for children in our neighborhood who need quality after school care to meet a safe place with Positive Role Models, which is our Kid Stop program. That's existed for a very, very long time, decades. And so I think those are a few. One of the ministries that's kind of emerging that we're super excited about is there's a brand new elementary school in town, Marcelo LeBeau, and they reached out to us, I want to say maybe 2 months ago, and said, we'd really love to partner with the church. We have, this new community that's forming and to support teachers and staff and students. And so we've had a team that's been working with them, and we provided dinner during parent-teacher conferences. I think we gave out hot dogs at one of their school carnivals. We're starting a mentoring program that's going to launch in January. And so, I think those are some of the key ways that the church is trying to live out its faith.
One of the biggest missional impacts I think that this church has made actually came from you a couple years ago when a local church, an Ethiopian church that had a fire in their building and it burned down and they were homeless. They didn't have a place to worship. And it was you who brought up the option, hey, we've got a chapel that it'll be a tight fit for them, but I think we can make it work. Could you explain a little bit of your thought process behind that and how that impacted them and how long they were here and just what that all entailed?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a total God thing. We saw in the news that St. Michael's Ethiopian Orthodox Church had this severe fire. They were absolutely not able to worship in their building. So actually I had a few members of the church reach out to me and say, did you see this? And I hadn't, and we said, we should really reach out and see how we might be able to help them or support them in this time. And we sat down with their pastor and one of their main leaders because it's an immigrant church, and so many of their members do not speak English well. And they said, our greatest need is to have some place to worship. And so we said, I think we could probably help with that. And so we kind of worked as a church council and invited them to come and worship with us. And they ended up being with us for almost a year, and it was awesome. They have a totally different worship style than we do, and so
They kind of make us look like lightweights.
a little bit, yeah. Because I would come to church, and I'm usually one of the first people on a Sunday morning, and they would already be here.
And they were still here when we left.
And they were still here often when I left and when our staff left. And so they were for several hours on Sunday mornings and in Amharic, and it was just a great way to make just a new connection and build these new friendships, but also support them in a time that was really, really challenging. And they weren't able to rebuild their existing building, but they found a new building. And so when they were ready to transition, we had a big potluck together because we're Methodist and we love to eat, and so it was kind of half American food and half Ethiopian food, and it was the best potluck I've ever had. That was my favorite, and so our choir sang and their choir sang, and it ended up being this beautiful partnership that we didn't expect.
When you think, what does Christianity mean? I think that sums it up pretty easily.
Yeah.
Of what you should do when you see people in need.
Absolutely, and it really wasn't a hard decision. When we found out that that's what they needed, the church said yes.
I've heard that nationally there's a trend that young people and young families are attending church more regularly. What can you attribute that to?
I think that there's a deepening hunger for faith and spirituality, and that we're especially seeing that in younger people, and so kind of one of the impacts of that is that people are trying to find faith communities where they can have their questions answered, where they can be in a community to ask questions about life and about faith, and also I think wanting something different for their families that they themselves maybe experienced, maybe didn't. But we live in a world that even though we're so connected, people are still really lonely, and social media is great in a lot of ways. I mean, this is wonderful with our podcast today. I mean, it brings a lot of, I think, joy and meaning into people's lives, but I think sometimes it also disconnects people from kind of that face-to-face experience. And so I wonder, with some of the disconnect that people experience in their day-to-day lives, if that's kind of increased their hunger to connect deeply with God and to connect deeply with other people kind of on that journey. Because life is hard, and when we don't have people to kind of walk with us on that journey, we know it. And so I think that there's just an increasing hunger for it.
With that increase in visitation, I've heard there's also a shortage of pastors.
Yeah, there is. Particularly, I think, in kind of some of our mainline traditions. And so certainly as United Methodist, there is a shortage of pastors.
You had mentioned that to me, I think, in a conversation we were having about like the seminary class that you graduated with. A lot of those students or the friends that you were in seminary with are no longer in the ministry. Can you explain maybe what you feel that's contributed to? I mean, obviously it's not an easy profession. It's not an easy way of life. It's not a simple job. So can you explain a little bit what challenges are, and what could people who maybe have that on their hearts, what could they be considering, or what could help solve that problem where people are leaving the ministry?
Absolutely. I think that probably one of the biggest challenges is burnout. And I know that can happen in a lot of different areas, but particularly COVID was really hard on a lot of congregations. It was hard on individuals, it was hard on families, it was hard on pastors, and we saw a huge exodus of people in ministry because you're kind of trying to navigate this time that nobody knows how to navigate. And so we, even in our own conference, we had quite a few people that they maybe retired a few years earlier than they had planned, and they were just tired, and it hasn't gotten easier. We live in a pretty polarized world right now. And so kind of leading a group of people to navigate that well together is challenging. And so I think burnout is a big factor.
Sure.
I think for people that are thinking or kind of feeling that tap on the shoulder to consider ministry, I think one of the things that helps you kind of navigate some of the weight of being a pastor, because it can be weighty. Even for me, I'm preparing for 2 funerals, and that will be happening within the next couple of days. And there's an honor in being able to walk with people in that time of life, but there's also a weight that you're with people. It's a really hard time, and it's, at least for me, it's kind of impossible not to feel that also. And so I think if for those that are thinking about ministry or kind of feeling that nudge, it's really important to find good mentors and that can kind of help you figure it out, and that you can go to with sometimes the questions that you feel might be stupid, that you can say, oh, I've had a really hard day, or I've had a really great day. And I've always been really fortunate to have just some fantastic mentors in my life, and one of my greatest joys is now that I get to be a mentor for others. And I think as much as we can do, and I'm sure it's true in other areas and other professions, but I think as much as we can do ministry with others, then you can kind of share the load.
Sure. Whenever we hire somebody new out of college, as a construction management degree, or even somebody who's just into the labor field, we don't make them a finished carpenter right away, or we don't just say, hey, you're a project manager now, good luck.
Yeah.
And it seems like in the ministry world, talking with you, that's kind of what happens sometimes with a shortage of pastors and a need for growth. And certainly there's rural communities that struggle with finding leadership. Sometimes those young, recent seminary graduates get put into that position where they're kind of left on their own. Is there something that the church is working on that can help kind of maybe bridge that gap or add support?
That's one of the things we're kind of dreaming about for what's next is, we are one of the larger congregations in our conference. And so how might we be able to encourage and lift up other pastors, even other congregations, as they're in their challenges and in their joys. And so we haven't quite figured out what that looks like yet, but there's a sense that, this church has always had kind of a leadership role within the conference, and so how might we live into that even more, knowing that happens so often, particularly to some of our younger, newer clergy, and you just can't put them on an island, and because it's hard to navigate that, and
Truly be a sense of burnout. Great way to start that process right away.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the realities is we see people leaving ministry. I've seen all kinds of stats, and so anywhere from 60 to 85% within the first 5 years. And sometimes that's because they found themselves in serving a church that they want to serve, that they feel called to serve, but that they're lonely and they feel alone, and things happen that they don't know how to handle, and they don't have that support network built up yet.
And there's those adults that they have to deal with.
Sometimes. So
So I was going to ask if Brian and I were ever going to put together a sermon, what would we talk about besides Noah building the ark?
I'd want to give you a really hard one.
Oh, sure.
Maybe Revelation or Job, or I don't know, what would you want to preach on? And you can't say Jesus.
Right. One of the things that's been a lot of fun for us involved in the church is we have an adult book study group, and we're currently reading a book about the Advent. And there's a lot of children's stories. The Christmas story that is not actually factual of what you hear in the children's stories, like the three wise men showing up to greet baby Jesus. He was probably like a toddler when they actually
that's
met
true.
there. It took me 46 years to figure that story out. Like, wait a minute. So certainly the scholastic things of the church would not be my forte. I think I'd go back to those children's stories. Building the Noah's Ark, I mean, from a construction side, that sounds like a unattainable task for a crew. When I look at the crew sizes we have and the project ahead of us, to build that by yourself would be a little bit of a challenge, for sure.
Well, and he was 300 years old, according to the book.
Right.
But they probably had a different concept of time.
I think they might have. I think they might have measured it slightly differently than we
months.
do.
One thing that does really impress me about what you do and the role you've taken as a pastor in a church, in construction, we talk schedules all the time, and we try to plan for things and have things laid out way in advance, and when materials are going to show up, and we have a plan for almost everything. And sure, things pop up, and we handle them. But in the church world, you can't plan for everything. You mentioned funerals. We wish we didn't have to deal with those, but those unfortunately just happen when they do. How do you react to that quick change of, all of a sudden I've got to get not only a message prepared and meet the family or continue to talk with them and work work with them through their grief and the struggles they're having, but also still run the business of a church and still have everything else on track that you already had planned for that week, or even sometimes it's a couple days.
I mean, it's actually one of my favorite parts about ministry, and is that every day is completely different. And sometimes even how you start the day is very different from how you end the day.
Sure.
And of course, funerals are hard because there's just such deep grief with that. But there's also it's kind of a holy moment to be with people also. And so, but kind of preparing for the unexpected, we have a great team, and so I'm certainly not pastoring alone. We have other pastors on our staff. We have great staff members that, and then just great parishioners that I feel like it's a collaborative approach to doing ministry together. And then just kind of pragmatically is you sort of anticipate the unexpected, and so I just have to kind of give myself some margin, knowing that sometimes my week is going to go in a totally different direction, and I might not get a day off, and that's okay. And so it's having kind of that, being kind of centered and having some space to sort of anticipate that there's probably going to be at least one thing that pops up that I wasn't expecting.
Sure. This past year you got to come out and experience the farm life.
I did.
On the Jans Ranch, and
Yeah.
see branding and the challenges we had with that. We've talked about in previous episodes. Did that solidify that you made the right choice in going into ministry and not?
Well, I'm definitely not meant to be a farmer, I'll tell you that. Yeah, that was such a neat experience. I've never experienced anything like that in my life. I mean, both my parents grew up on farms, and that's the same for my husband. But branding, digging a cow out of a well that you didn't know was there, watching my husband absolutely freeze in that moment. That was a lot of fun. It was fun because obviously good
Everything turned out
outcome.
great, yeah.
Calf is fine.
Thanks to your prayers, I think that really,
Honestly, I was praying really fervently. I thought
could feel it.
I could not offer much in the physical sense, but the spiritual sense, we were on it.
we needed it, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was great. We loved it.
So, Sarah, where can people find more about First United Methodist Church?
So they can go to our website at sfumc.org, or follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or just come by and check us out on a Sunday morning. We have 3 services. Our most traditional is at 8:30. Our blended is at 9:45. So we have organ, and we have a full praise band, and then our modern service is at 11:01.
I think that's one of the true greatest things about the church, is that there is something for every generation, every belief, every what people look for in a church. Because of those 3 services, you can get a more modern feel that a lot of big mega churches are doing. We're doing that right here in these walls of a 100-year-old church. But you can also still have the traditional service, and the message is the same across all of them, just presented to meet wherever everybody else is at.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that we have 3 services, and the message is the same, and mostly, although I do hear from time to time, you said that differently. I said, I don't know, but we'll say that's the Holy Spirit. But
You're not just reading from a page, you're actually talking from your heart every time you
So,
give us
but I am grateful to be a part of a community that I think, because people do worship in different ways, and different styles of music speaks to different people in different ways, and so I think the church has really embraced that that we want to do as much as we can to help people grow in their faith journey, no matter where they are, and sort of what speaks to their heart.
In a recent conversation we had, you mentioned the growth of First United Methodist Church, and it's been on a positive swing. Now, for the last several years that you've been here, we've seen growth, but also, as we talked about with funerals and things that may happen, the growth has kind of maintained. We've brought new people in, which every church needs to do, especially in an older congregation where we've got people that have been here a very long time. Can you expand a little bit about where you see the future going with that growth, and what excites you most about hearing that.
Yeah. So this year was actually the first time in about 30 years that we've seen growth in that way, but we have been growing the last couple of years, as you mentioned, and I think where I see this going is I think First United Methodist Church, the people. Is what can we do as a church to empower people to live out their faith where they are in their jobs, in their businesses, in their families, in their community commitments. And so kind of my dream for the church is what can I do as a pastor to empower others to live out their faith so that people feel that impact of First United Methodist Church throughout the community. And so when you're serving on the YMCA board and bringing your faith to that table, what does that look like? When you're mentoring a child at Marcella LeBeau, what does that, how does that kind of trickle out? And I kind of have this dream of us being a leader of leaders. And so of how can we truly, intentionally encourage and equip and support people so that they can continue to grow in their faith, but also as leaders in the community. This church has a lot of leaders. I've never quite served a church that has so many people who are leaders in so many different areas of their life. And so I feel like it's kind of a unique place and a unique time in the history of the church to really look at how could we live out kind of that impact for Christ in all areas of our lives.
Great. One thing that really just stands out for me too is 20 years ago when Stacy and I first started dating. She grew up Catholic, and so as we started dating, that was one of the big questions: is what church will we attend together? And so we took turns going to Catholic churches that she would attend, and we came here because I had been attending here by myself, and this specific church alone was just so welcoming. We would walk through the front doors, people knew our names. They were asking us to get involved, and how could we, get involved in the ministry and the support and some of the mission stuff. And that was 20 years ago. And so obviously we made this our home. We got married in this church. Our kids have all grown up and are in youth group here. And that culture or that presence of welcoming, not only has it been consistent, but since you've come here, I think it's amplified and become even more. How do you maintain that? How do you push to get everybody in? Because it's not just you. You're not the one standing at the door greeting everybody, but it is the congregation that sees your drive and mission and is uplifted by it and encouraged to do more.
Thank you. I think part of it is just, I think, encouraging people to be that friendly face, but I think it's also kind of creating opportunities for people to experience true and authentic welcome, and that somebody had to learn your name and had to learn Stacy's name, and so to have it be kind of both in an organic way, but also kind of in an organized way. And so I think that's really been one of our focuses, is that we want people to experience kind of this extravagant embrace of God when they come come through the doors. And so I had an experience when I was in college, and I went to a Christian liberal arts school, and I was taking a religious class, and religion like 101 or something like that, and we had to do church visits, and I did too. And I will tell you, it was really eye-opening. So I went on this church visit, and I was single, and so I was by myself. And at both churches, I was not greeted once. No one acknowledged that I was even in the room, and no one said hi, and I did. I kind of snuck in the back, and I kind of snuck out, and sometimes people don't want, the big welcome kind of thing, but I mean, it's nice to know that you're seen, right. And so I've always had that in the back of my mind, that it's really important to me that people feel seen. And so we need to build systems and structures to make sure that people experience that welcome and that hospitality. Because often people, if someone is going to a new church, it's often because something has happened in their life. Maybe they've had a loss, maybe they're kind of in a big transition, maybe they're trying to figure something out, that generally people don't wake up on a Sunday morning and say, "Carl, I haven't been to church for 30 years, but I think I'll try it today." Usually there's some sort of something that happens in their life that prompts them, that kind of opens up people's hearts to think, maybe this is something I'll try, I'll seek out. And so I'm just aware of that if people are here for the first time, there's a reason. And so we want to do our very best for them to experience God's love.
I think you manage to do that every Sunday and every day throughout the week.
Oh,
It truly
thank
is a blessing
you.
at this church.
Thank you.
Well, Pastor Sara, I want to thank you for joining us today, giving us some history on yourself, the church, the project that we did here. And hopefully the folks that see this will reach out and you can gain some more followers and members, and church can continue to grow.
It's been a blessing, and I've been here for about 6 years, and I'm hoping that I'll get the fortune of serving for many more.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Two Bees in a Podcast. Be sure to like us and subscribe, and you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music. And I'm going to let Pastor Sara tell you guys one more time, if you want to know more information about First United Methodist Church, you can share those details.
Yeah, sounds good. So if you want to check us out online at sfumc.org, or come to church on a Sunday morning, we're at 401 South Spring Avenue here in Sioux Falls, as well as, and we do have Christmas Eve services coming up that we're really excited about. It's obviously Christmas all around us, and so we're going to be worshiping on Christmas Eve at 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. And so check us out in person or online, or just stop by, and we'd love to get to know you.
If you do stop in, you'll probably find me and my family up in the balcony, so come and say hi. We're happy to welcome you here too.
I love it.
Thank you, Sara.
Thank you.
We appreciate you listening. Everything we do is a collaboration, and we appreciate you being here to share this with us.
Yeah, our goal is always the same, to build relationships, to build structures, and to tell the stories that we've experienced along the way.
Feel free to drop us a comment, share it with a friend, and like this podcast.
Or call me if you just want to talk about cows.
So until next time,
Keep building. No, get out of here.